My Book Real Growth is being launched in the next few weeks. So if you're interested in getting your copy, you'll get the insights from the leaders of sport, rehabilitation and business. So click the link below and I hope you found it useful. Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Professor Lennard Funk, who is a consultant shoulder surgeon. Len, great to see you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you very much for having me on. I'm very honoured.
Well, do you know what? You said that to me in the email, and that made me feel very honoured when you said that, because it's like you and I have known each other off and on for many years, but we've never really sort of sat down and properly got into your background and so on. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing that and sharing that with the audience. So, in terms of doing that, we were just talking about like where you're from and so on. So talk to me about where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in South Africa, so you can probably tell a little bit by the accent, and did all my schooling and undergraduate in South Africa, and then came to the UK with my wife, then girlfriend. We came over for to do some locums and pay off student debt. I had a job waiting for me in South Africa. At that time, it was before Google and before the internet and Google Maps, and someone had organized a job for me in a place called Bury. And the only one I could find on the map, I said to my wife, was this Bury. I'm going to Bury in Bury St. Edmunds. And she laughed and she said, "No, it's Bury near Rochdale where my grandmother lives. I'm coming with you." So we came over here with £100 and two backpacks and a student debt. Arrived in at Bury Market. My first taste of the north of England was Bury black pudding. So
And you've not really left the area since, so you must like it.
I love Bury black pudding. Yes, I do. Yeah, we've settled in Bolton, and we've lived in Bolton for the most of the time we've been in the UK. And as you can tell from the accent, although my kids sound like Peter Kay. Yeah, we came from the hottest tropical places to the wettest, greyest part of the UK. Never look back.
And that's it. And yeah, same as here. I love it as well. It's great on that bit. So like for when, so before you decided to come to Manchester then, so what made you want to go down the route of like what was your upbringing in South Africa and what made you go into medicine?
Well, so in my family, nobody had gone to university. My dad was a steel worker. He worked in the same company making steel from the age of 14, and had no education, didn't finish school. My mom, similarly, she finished school, but she worked in a shop for all her career. Um, and she was very keen that she would have a son who's a lawyer or a doctor, or at least go to university. And I guess when you look backwards, I understand why I went the route I did. I didn't get into medicine, by the way. I I never got the grades. I never to get into medicine ever. So I got in sort of through the back door. I did a BSc in physiology and biochemistry, did research in sports physiology. Then I went into physiotherapy. And then round the time in South Africa, they were increasing the number of medical posts because they wanted more doctors for the rural areas. So from our physio class, a few of us transferred across into medicine. So I never ever officially got into medicine. Then I always felt through medicine I was never good enough because I never got in through the right route.
That's mental. I've never didn't
Yeah,
know that. So you've got that background, right? That's really interesting because like Wayne
yeah,
Diesel and Helen Milson are good friends of mine who are
yeah,
physios from. I mean, have you come across those in your professional life?
yeah. I know Wayne. I know Wayne well. Yes, many times.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've shared many patients.
I'm sure. No, no, I'm sure.
Yeah,
So that's fascinating then. So what was the transition then to moving into
yeah.
medicine?
Literally, they came to our physio class and said, anybody want to transfer across into medicine? And about a quarter of us put our hands up and transferred across into medicine. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to do orthopaedics. So ideally, my thing was my background obviously was in sports, musculoskeletal stuff. So orthopedics was something that really interested me early on. Also because I'd experienced orthopedics from the patient side. I fractured my spine at the age of 18 playing rugby. And that's why I always say, if I hadn't done that, I would have been a Springbok. No. But I fractured my spine and I couldn't walk. My right leg was completely, dead. And eventually I had spinal surgery and I woke up and the pain was completely gone and I could walk. And to me, it was like a miracle. Now, I never realized that that was probably one of the big drivers. Another driver was also around the same time, I think it was before that. I was in the gym with a friend of mine and he dislocated his shoulder and we had this big night planned out on the town. And I thought, oh God, that's ruined our night on the town. But there was an orthopedic surgeon in the gym and he came over, he just popped his shoulder back in and we had a great night out. So, to me, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And amongst other little things along the way when you look back. Yeah.
I think it's really like you said also you never felt good enough or that you should be doing medicine. And how was the
Yeah.
support within your schooling system when you couldn't get at the grades to go and do that? So, but did they encourage you in any respect on that, or were they saying no?
There was there's non-existent. No, no, nothing at all. Um, I fortunately I failed my way through most of medicine, had loads of resets, but interestingly, and all the way through felt I was too dumb. But interestingly, I got the orthopedic prize as an undergraduate. Um, and then when I became a house officer, it was really interesting because I realized then you don't need good grades to be a doctor. You really don't, because it's actually because I would see patients, and I guess like you, I'd go and look things up and work it out. And as soon as you were treating patients, it became more relevant. So, I mean, I felt I certainly was a very good doctor, but I was a very bad student.
I think that's so interesting. And like chatting with your contemporaries, Andy Williams, James Calder, they say very similar things to you in
Hmm,
terms of actually it's so focused on academic and it's now physio is really academic.
I know.
And it's like, well, how does that are we creating the right
Hmm.
people coming through, or is it geared on the wrong things, on like whether it's on communication or personal skills, whatever it may be? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think my son's actually going through the application process. Funnily enough, he's going through a similar route as me. He did a BSc in biomedical engineering. Interestingly enough, at the same university I did my engineering. So I did an engineering master's. He's doing it at the same university as my engineering master in the same school, which is great. But he's now applying for medicine, and academics is a huge part of it. But I think if you get past the academics, they are trying to screen people very carefully on other attributes. But unfortunately, academics is still the number one. It really is key. So, personally, I'm not sure it's the right way, but I think the way they're going about screening people, interviewing, that sort of stuff is probably the right way. And yeah, I've seen many, 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 many students come and go and of mine, and cream always rises. If I said this to my son as well, if I mean medicine's not the best job at the moment, and I guess like physio and nursing, it's got to be your passion. If it's not your absolute passion, then don't do it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And like because you had that drive for orthopedics from the various reasons that you mentioned there. So what were your aspirations when you transitioned? Were you always thinking of going on to do what you're going to do?
I never had any aspirations, never had any ambitions. I just enjoyed the ride. I was just doing what I loved and what I enjoyed all the way from, right from day one. And that's the key, I think, for everyone is, yeah, if you have a goal or a target. I know people always say you have to have a goal or a target. I never had a goal or a target ever. I just enjoyed what I was doing.
I think it's interesting actually because we were chatting that I've been running my company for 14
Mm,
years, pretty much exactly now. And really only now I am writing down like our goals and I kind of feel bad for it in a
mm.
way. I feel like I'm not doing this right here. It's like I think it's good to have a goal, but also
Yeah,
if you don't always know exactly
yeah,
what you want to do, and it's sometimes it's quite nice having that,
yeah.
well, let's see what comes up.
But I guess your goals are to provide a great service, to be the best you can. So your goal is not, I will be the professor of physiotherapy in 5 years' time, or I will be a millionaire. I think
Yeah.
those sort of goals can end up to problems because you may not achieve them. But if your goals are, to be the best physician you can be, to provide the best service you can be, to be the best, I'm sure those are what yours are, then
Yeah.
that's great.
No, I think it is. It's actually a very good point. Essentially, now I
Mm.
was like, I want to be a company that people love working for.
Mm.
So I want my colleagues to love it, and I want clients
Mm.
who we interact with to love working with us. And that very simplistically, that's genuinely what I want.
Yeah.
And whatever that
Yeah.
encompasses, I want everyone to enjoy that experience.
100% agree with that. That's the most
Mhm.
important thing. Same, when we're going to theatre, the main thing is that everybody is happy in that theatre, that everybody is comfortable, and the same with the patients, that every patient leaves satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah, no, really interesting. And then, so when you were over into Manchester, Bury, Bolton, that area, so
Mm.
what were you doing there? What was the role?
Oh, I started off in A&E as a house officer, and then it was you did a week on and a week off. So we do a week and then we go travel, and a week and go travel, and then a training job came up in Manchester, and people said to me you should apply for it, and I applied for it and I got it. So I had to then let the professor in South Africa know that I wouldn't be going back. He wasn't very happy, so I've stayed as far away from him as I can since then. Um, and so I got the training job there, did my registrar training, my SHO training in Manchester, then got a registrar job in Yorkshire. Would drive over every day from Bolton to Yorkshire, which is a great training opportunity. And then um, one of the bosses, Tony Banks, who was a big influence in my life, a real guiding light. He then said there was an academic job in Manchester, which I came back for. And that sent me down, more of the academic route in Manchester, where I then, took a role running the undergraduate training program. and as a lecturer at at Manchester Uni first, and then went over to Salford, where I set up postgraduate orthopaedic training. So I did a fellowship in Reading, then a fellowship, well, not a fellowship, I spent a few months in France, learning arthroscopic shoulder surgery, there wasn't much of it in the UK at the time, brought that back. Yeah, took a consultant job in Salford, as I say, academic post, and then moved over to Wrightington, which was even more specialist.
And so, like, what was the network like? You said it's not great to be in medicine at the moment. Like, what was it like going back those years to the environment, the
I think,
community?
yeah, I think as a young doctor, I don't like the term junior. They now call them resident doctors. But yeah, at that time as an SHO, it was very different to how it is for them now. People always say how bad it was in the old days, how we had it hard. I think we had it great. I think it's much harder for them now. Um, yeah. So no, I I enjoyed every minute of it. I can't think back to, it was great. You
Mm,
worked hard and you played hard.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things now is it feels like at the moment in life, not just in this
Mm,
particular industry, is that it's overwhelming. Like with WhatsApp, you've got
yeah.
email, you've got social media, LinkedIn, all of these things. And
Mm,
it feels like as the people I speak to, whether they're in sport or whether they're in healthcare, NHS or private, is that no one's really got any time for anything. And it's like you're on all the time. Like how is
yeah.
that, how have you
And
seen that in your
It's
career?
not, and it's not only that social media, but it's all the oversight, the in mandatory training, the excess paperwork because it's all online now, the constant oversight, so everything has to be checked, double checked, triple checked. Not bad, but it does then make it quite overwhelming for people. So yeah, you're right. It's all of that which makes it a little tougher. But when I look at my younger colleagues, they've grown up in that system, and I think they can handle it fairly well. And they have a much better work-life balance, I think, than we had in our days. Um, in terms of social media and all of that, I don't really know. You probably know more than I do.
So in terms of what makes you say that that you had it like in terms of work-life balance was harder when you were doing it?
Oh, I think because we were in work a lot more, so we did, like on call the 1 in 3. We when we were at work, it was intense work, but we didn't have all the paperwork that they have to do now. We had more responsibility as a younger doctor, and it was longer hours. So in that way it was tough, but to be honest with you, you were part of a team. You worked, in a good hierarchy, so you were always very well supported. So you worked very hard, um, but then when you off, you played very hard.
Yeah. Yeah, what was it like going into Wrightington, which is an internationally renowned orthopedic
Mm.
center? Like when you go into somewhere like that, like how are you intimidated? What's your approach? Is it exciting or is it you're nervous? What's it like?
I was very lucky. I think with a lot of consultants at Wrightington, you're chosen. You are selected for a reason. So I was selected at the time because they were very strong on shoulder arthroplasty, upper limb arthroplasty, but I'd set up an arthroscopy soft tissue service at Salford, and they wanted to have a arthroscopy soft tissue component to Wrightington. So I went there and really were given the opportunity to develop, a tertiary arthroscopic service. So, it was phenomenal. And also to arrive to, a unit that was so cohesive, the upper limb unit, you were like welcomed like family. It was John Stanley who was the head of the family, then Ian Trail. And that's still, I've just been back for the conference last week. That still goes on today, even though it's getting bigger and bigger. So, I was very, very extremely honored, very lucky to have worked in such a fantastic unit. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had my hand operated on by Mr. Morali. I don't know if he was there when you
Uh,
were there.
and looks like all fingers are still there. That's good.
Well,
I couldn't see it. Is there an extra? I thought there was an extra.
well, honestly, I went in first, and the guy was like, "Yeah, this looks really bad." But I'm actually my result. He was very happy with it
Yeah.
that I can fully flex it, and that's a number of years ago now. Before I was in this industry, actually.
He learned
Um,
that. He learned that from the mechanic.
well, I'm glad I didn't know that beforehand, but yeah. But it is fascinating, like going to Wrightington and you see the education centre they've got there, and there's
Yeah.
so few specialisms in there. And you think I just think to have that was an NHS job, obviously, but to have such amazing expertise, my whole experience was absolutely outstanding on that. And I worked hard on my rehab and went to the hand therapist and so on. But like, it's the NHS is quite a unique thing out there that's in it. I know it's under stress now, but I think it's always been under stress. Like even when I started in it, it wasn't like that was all perfect then either. But like, what's your view on it?
Cool. I think there's incredible medical, clinical, all the staff are phenomenal. Rhinton's a small place, so everybody knew everybody, including the porters, the cleaners, the, radiology, everyone, unbelievable people. So, there are fantastic, core of clinical workers within the NHS.
Yeah. No, I think
That's
it's yeah.
that's as much as I'll say.
There's other not as good
Amazing.
things there, but yeah, we'll leave that for another day.
We won't go down the route of politics.
Yeah, no, very wise, very wise.
Yeah.
But in terms of that for you then, so where did the interest in shoulder come from?
So that's one of those things is like you look back when you get older. I think I could never identify it when people asked me 10, 15 years ago. So I guess when I look back, perhaps a couple of things. Number one was that shoulder dislocation. I talked about that magic episode. Secondly, I think when I was doing orthopaedics as a registrar, all they were offering was people would come with cuff tears, injection, injection, injection. That was all that was being offered, and I remember doing putty plaque procedures. I don't know if you'll remember what that is, historical procedures. Um, and I guess I thought when I then worked with an upper limb surgeon and saw some of the procedures he was doing, I think that interested me. And also, it involved a lot more rehab, as I found it very interesting because, from a rehab point of view, as I worked many years ago, before I did my medicine and physio, I worked in a neuro rehab unit for a year. And a lot of the things I saw there, I was trying to explain to patients, like, deltoid rehab and things like that from neuro rehab, when I was a registrar. So, and then working with a shoulder surgeon in Yorkshire, he then said to me, there's this arthroscopy thing coming for the shoulder as well. And rotator cuff repairs and things like this are going to be done completely differently in the future. And he put me in touch with a surgeon in Canada who I then contacted, and then he put me in touch with Steve Copeland. So I then did the fellowship with him. And I think what fascinated me with Steve Copeland, he was one of the only people who had a physiotherapist in his clinics. It was unheard of in those days, and I learned a huge amount from her as well. And I think it combined a lot of the skills that I'd had, which I saw were missing or lacking elsewhere. So it was exciting because it was so-called a Cinderella joint at the time. So it was a good opportunity to get into something that was, up my wheelhouse.
Mm. And how helpful was it having your physio background then, in terms of
Oh,
that? Was that
very. I think to be honest, I didn't spend much time in actual physiotherapy school, but doing the year of neuro rehab and my sports physiology background really was incredibly useful. And that helped a lot in getting, a MDT service set up in Salford. So I met a physio who came down to visit the unit from Newcastle, Kathleen. And then when I got my consultant job at Salford, they already were just starting with ESPs in spines there. And Kath Leftley, who you might know, was one of the spinal ESPs. So I put a case together to have ESPs for shoulders and got Kathleen over from Newcastle. And Kath Leftley was sort of the head of the ESPs at Salford. She thought it was really exciting, and she came over to shoulders and really set up, I think, one of the first MDT services then.
Well, in terms of like the dynamic then of there's radiology, physio, surgeon,
Mm-mm.
doctors, SEMs now, like more of those coming
Yeah.
around. Like, how do you, what is the best way of bringing that together? I know that's a big question, but like, what's your
Yeah.
experience of MDTs and making them work best?
Yeah, well, I think it's essential. I think no man is an island. You don't know everything. And the great thing, one of the good things we got out of COVID was we were able to set up MDTs and complex case group discussions online. So we have regular every 2 weeks private practice. MDT, and we do it with the guys from Liverpool as well. So I think it's become pretty much standard in the NHS now, and I guess also in private groups. And people are starting to work more over the last few years in cohesive group practices,
In terms
which
of
is
like
good for
making a
everyone.
successful one, because I think there are egos in medicine, like there's different
Mm,
dynamics and so on to manage it. So what do you
mm.
think what is the best way to have something that's the most effective? Like, is there a particular team or anything that you've thought this just really works well? And like, what were the characteristics if there were, or what are the things that don't make things work well, do you think?
I think they've got to want to work together. That's the most important thing. And I think even those with the big egos nowadays know that you have to work together or in a group. So it's just managing personalities, like, just like the office. You got to manage the personalities, be the gym.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah, and I think that's it. Is that inevitably you need to have an ego to some extent. It just
Yeah,
depends where it goes to. Confidence, conviction is so important in anything when you're communicating it internally and especially to the client, to the patient that you're working with.
yeah.
And then in terms of like work at your private work, at what
Mm.
point did you start doing that?
Well, I always said I would never do private practice, but when I started at Salford, I had a friend who I trained with, who you might know, Sanj Jari, and Sanj had come back from America, and he had seen how they do things in America, and he wanted to set up a sports medicine group. So he'd asked me to come in and do the upper limb. So I literally within a year or two of starting my consultant job on the NHS, Sanj had dragged me into private practice. And I'm ever grateful to him because he taught me so many things. He was, the first person to set up regular Friday evening physiotherapy teaching events for the private physios, for the clubs. Yeah, I learned a hell of a lot from him and a guy called Henry Maxwell. So it was good fun. So it just started from there, and I think it then just becomes word of mouth.
Yeah, no, I drive past his thing on the parkway going into Didsbury. You
Oh,
see the knee dock. It's
oh
still
yeah,
there. Yeah, he's
yeah.
still there. So what made you think you wouldn't go into private practice then?
Um, because I just seen the added complexity. My whole aim was to develop our shoulder service, our MDT shoulder service at Salford. That was, and I still did it, but that was my focus. That was my drive. And my father-in-law, he's an orthopedic surgeon who was always very anti-private practice. So, and he'd done a hell of a lot of good. He worked in Zimbabwe and in the more rural areas of South Africa as an orthopedic surgeon. So I sort of, you know, I looked up to him a lot as well and what he'd done. Very altruistic.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there can be that perception that if you're private, it's too commercial. It's because of that.
Yep.
I think it also comes from that NHS mindset of like healthcare should be free. It's taking advantage.
No,
It's a funny thing, isn't it? And certainly in this country.
nothing's free. That's the problem.
Yeah, and but it's interesting at the moment. Like if I think my time, well, in my time when I started in this area, it was a lot of my time was spent in the NHS
Yeah.
working there. But really now,
Yeah.
80% was focused on that, 20% on sport. The 20% remains in sport, and 80 is on private now, just
Yep.
because of just like the restrictions. I think, and also you mentioned it there, like people have got to have the drive to want to do this stuff. And it feels like it's such a slog in the NHS trying to
Yeah.
bring new innovation initiatives, these things in there. It's difficult because they're already really under the cosh with things. Whereas in private, they've got to differentiate themselves to the NHS. Why are you charging for this? So I think I
Right.
found it a fascinating time in the last 5 years. COVID, yes, but also just the fact that the private sector does seem to be thriving.
And also it's because for me it was where you could offer the service to the patients that you want to be able to offer them. So you can actually provide the service that you want to provide without, massive restrictions and limitations. I think that was the biggest thing. We like you, we were able to offer the same MDT service as well privately, but also do a lot more than we could with the limitation of the NHS. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the big driver for you. And as good physio practices, you can then offer the service and work the way you want to work and how you'd like to work. So that autonomy is important.
No, definitely. Yeah, you've not restricted to the length of treatment time for what you can do in terms of the team that you can put in, the technology, all of these things. You've got more ownership to be able to create something, and that's what I think is really exciting, and that's what I love working with people on is inspiring the growth opportunities. What else can we do? How do we
Yeah.
make these better for everyone? And yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And on that note, so I
Mm.
remember when I set the company up as well as you'd created this really cool thing that I'd never seen before, the website where you had so much resource on there. So like, how did that come about? Remember the website that you were doing? Like,
Which
I remember.
which website?
So this was, I remember going through
Orthopaedics.
Kathy Stone, and it just basically had a load of education bits on it. You had like referral sources of practices that you could get into, but it's something that I'd not seen before.
So I mean, there was. I guess a few. There was Orthotears, which was an orthopedic one that was many years ago, which was just part. So when we were training for our orthopedic exam, I just put all our study materials online for ourselves to see. It just ended up with thousands of other people seeing it, which was a bit of a shock to me. Um, then there was a shoulder doc. I
It was the
did
shoulder doc. It was the shoulder doc.
shoulderdoc.co.uk. So
Mm.
yeah, so that was, well, the name was a bit of a joke, but then there all sorts of docs started popping up, like you said, the knee doc and all of that. The name of shoulder doc was either shoulder documents or doctor, so that's why I did that. And that was the idea of a friend of mine who's an IT guy. So that wasn't intended to be what it was either. It was when we started the job with Kathleen, MDT service, and Kath Leftley, we did booklets, patient information booklets for the NHS. For Salford. I paid for them myself, Kathleen and Kath Leftley, and OT called Nicola set it up. I paid for all the booklets. The pre-op nurses gave them to the patients. And then after, 6 months or so, the booklets all ran out. And then we found out that the trust management had won an award for the best patient information booklets on our booklets. So, which we didn't know about at some NHS management thing. So I went to the trust and I said to them, well, can you pay for the booklets now, the reprints? And this might sound familiar to you. The pre-op department said orthopedics had to pay. Orthopedics said physio had to pay. Physio said, OT had to pay. OT said outpatients had to pay. So they never got printed. So a friend of mine called Ken Powell, who's an IT guy, said to me, well, why don't you put them online and then just refer your patients to the website? So he set up a fantastic thing called a CMS for me, which is a content management system. So I could add all sorts of things onto that. So over the years, I just kept anything I wanted. Patients would ask a question and I'd put it on there. I put all my student stuff, all our postgraduate stuff on there. Anything I just put on there. And Yeah, and it just grew, and it was really aimed just at my patients and my students and myself. And then I was very fortunate. I was involved. I came across a medical illustrator who was a student. She was just qualifying, and she did some stuff with a physio for paddling, and then I actually employed her for a few years on my own pocket. And she did all sorts of amazing stuff. We won awards, and we had loads of stuff she'd done and built. And then she eventually had such a great practice. She went off freelance, and we were able to add all sorts of illustrations. So the website really got quite massive, been quite expensive. And my son's the website's just been redone because the CMS is very old. And these things only last a certain number of years, and you've got to rebuild them. They cost a fortune to rebuild, but my son's, over the last 18 months, he's redone the whole site with Ken. So yeah, that's what it is.
It's interesting, isn't it? You're doing that. You're
Mm.
doing it for one thing, which you think's a very simple thing, but then all of a sudden, a lot of the physios that I would interact with would be like, "God, we got this amazing resource for this. Like, go on here." And I'd not seen it. I'm like, God, that is a massive amount of information, of
Yeah.
content, of great stuff. It's almost like the podcast before a podcast where you're creating something that you were just interested in and want to help people with.
Mm.
But then, do you like how did you look? Like you say, it costs money to do this stuff. So how do you look at this as a business venture, or how do you
It's,
look at that thing of like investment versus? Uh,
there's there's no money come out of it. I've lost tens of thousands on it. I could tell you exactly how much. My wife's kept count. Um, so yes, I could have bought another house. So what you're saying? What's there was no aim. I was just doing what I was enjoying. I'd do it with holding the baby on my in my arm at 3 in the morning and typing away, doing stuff. I did it between patients in clinic when someone would ask something. I think, oh, other people might want to know that, so I'll put that on there. It's just one of those things. It was just something I just did.
it's
It was
interesting
there
though.
was never any intention behind it other than to provide the bit when the biggest intention was because a lot of information was coming out of America for patients and it didn't apply to our practice. So the biggest intention was to give my patients information that was relevant to what we wanted them to know.
But I think one of the things I've found most interesting about doing these interviews and then since pulling a publication together based on it is that the reinforcement of learning and getting yourself into it has been so valuable for me.
Yeah.
And then naturally people look at you as look, this is a real thought leader in this space. So I'm sure you get spoken about more because that was me doing it. So there's maybe not always a direct financial thing that you can attribute to it, but you've enjoyed it. You've probably learned quite a lot doing it, and your
That's
reputation skyrockets because it's like this guy's really doing a great thing with this. It was very innovative when I looked at it.
yeah.
It was like we've not seen anything like it before.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people always talk reputation. People always say, "Oh, thought leader." I have no idea what you're talking about when people say these sort of things. Yeah, I just did what I enjoy doing. There's it's quite scary when people say these sort of things because there's a level of expectation, and I don't want people to expect anything from me. I'm just a shoulder surgeon. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amongst other things, but professionally, that's what I've done. Yeah, and what's more important, I think, is really watching now, seeing what other people are doing, seeing what you're doing is phenomenal. Like you say, this whole podcast era is and video era is really exciting. Yeah.
But it is, but again, I think probably the same as you, really. I love it. Like, what a
Mm.
privilege to me to get to speak to you for an hour, ask you questions that I'm genuinely interested in. Like, I've found loads of really interesting stuff out from the way that you're talking on this, which I never would have done previously. And then you get to share it. And so but it's very similar to what you've said, really, is I
Mm.
love it. It's great. Like, for me, and it has been really helpful for me and my career and profile and those things. But that definitely wasn't why I was doing it. But that's just a byproduct of things, and it's obviously it's work as well that you're not making money for. But I believe that things happen. Like you mean not that I'm saying cream about me, but when you do stuff, you do get benefits from it as
Yeah.
well. So
Sorry.
yeah, that's all right. No, no, look, this is informal.
And,
No worries
and
here.
and I think what you say really highlights something which I always say to people. I said this to my daughter very much. A lot of the time, people thinking, "What should I be doing?" Because that's where it brings in your whole social media thing. Is people get this perception from social media, you should be doing this. There's a level of expectation, and all of that. And you never feel, what should I be doing? Do what you enjoy and enjoy what you're doing. And then whether you make money out of it, whether you become famous out of it, it doesn't matter. You'll be happy. If you are seeking fame, if you're seeking money, you will never be happy.
Yeah, yeah, no, I absolutely,
And that's
absolutely
what
agree.
you've done and are doing right now, hopefully.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think it's yeah, it just feels a lot more authentic, and you
Yeah,
can see stuff on, you do see stuff out there, and just like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure that they truly believe that, and that's yeah, that it does come across in
yeah.
that perspective, and that it's a practical thing.
I'll
How do
tell you what's interesting around that. We always moaned about Dr. Google, and people would always come in with about Google stuff, and it would be so far wrong. Amazing. I don't know if you find this amazing how many patients come in to me and say, this is what ChatGPT said. And I have to say, I'm really impressed a lot of the time. I think, wow.
yeah, well, it's been
Yeah.
where do you see the future of? I mean, it's
Oh,
only
yeah.
getting better, Chat GPT
Oh,
on
yeah.
it.
Oh, AI, absolutely. I mean, AI will come into us making clinical decision making better in terms of, assimilating the data for us as well, because, not all our, when you're making a decision, only a third of your decision is based on the data or evidence. So, and the data or evidence, sorry about this, one of my things, clinical decision making, but your data or evidence is only based on your recent experience or your interpretation, not your overall summary of the evidence. So things like AI will come in and give an overall summary rather than your most recent bias. So I think in terms of clinical decision making, it'll be phenomenal. And I think also in terms of informing patients, they will be slightly better informed, but I'm no expert on it. That's just what I'm seeing. And also with surgery and physio, what do you see?
I mean, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, certainly in an imaging perspective, that's been
Mm,
one of the foremost things that they're
yeah.
doing, and that is really incredible how quick that's progressing, and some really
Mm,
really cool stuff that's coming out there.
mm,
And I'm chatting with the likes of Shub Bass, who's doing quite a lot of
mm,
work in this space, from the
yeah.
radiology side, and it's really exciting. But I mean, as you say,
Mm,
it's moving so quick. It's really
mm,
hard to know what it is. But I think the point that you mentioned there, I think as a communication tool alone, I think
mm,
it's very helpful because you
mm,
can, like a lot of our team say, the newer people when they join, they don't always. I think the way that their English, fundamentally their English isn't as good as mine is. That's a
mm,
basic thing. But also speaking in the right voice to people and how you're
mm,
approaching them, it really does help with that and trying to make it relatable so that it's
mm,
it's it's answering the things that you want to communicate. So I think as a basic communication tool, it's really helpful. But then on the
mm,
technical side, that's really really interesting from the imaging piece in terms of predictive and that bit. However, as you say, I think we always need to embrace it and see the opportunities rather than, oh, there's going to be job reductions and all of that. I think that's not the right mindset for it.
mm. No, no, no. It's a tool to assist us, and it's actually been there in the background for many, many years. Yeah, I think it was developed in the 1930s.
Really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really but it's again that's why I think it's such an exciting time. And if we all embrace this stuff, there's massive opportunity. The challenges, yes, but let's not worry about that. Let's look at what we can do rather than what the restrictions are. And in terms of like you, how did you become a professor? I've always been quite intrigued by that.
Well, I mean, the you have to work with an academic institution, and then they have a point scoring system based on um, a number of factors, publications, research, but also which publications you've done, been edited, all your academic side. So it's all not clinical, but it's all purely what you've done academically. And so in my case, I was an honorary lecturer, but then I got involved with Salford Uni in setting up a postgraduate orthopaedic program, which then I think shot me up the point scale. So I actually got employed and was an employed full professor for a while. But I dropped that back to honorary because I just couldn't handle all the demands, university demands at that stage. Um, and they've never taken the honorary. The course is finished. We don't run it anymore. So I'm just involved with them supervising a few students now and again. So that's how it is for me. I think different universities have different points systems. So people can become honorary professors or associate professors with different universities on different point systems. But you have to, they have a criteria-based system. So you could apply.
Yeah, I'll think about that one. Yeah, no, yeah, that's interesting on there as well because I think I think you've done a load of different things on there, and it's like I am really passionate. How do we help with the that some of the non-academic pieces of things as well? How do we help people be more rounded and thus be
Yeah,
better clinicians, people? That's what I'm passionate about. Is that how do we
yeah,
communicate better, look at collaboration, connection,
yeah,
working together better?
yeah.
Because that's where I think it's not particularly great, and there's a lot of competition and that's not what I'm about. Is that how do we do things differently to that?
That won't get you a professorship at a university.
Yeah, I'll give it a miss then. I'm fine with that one.
Yeah.
And then so like, how do you switch off from what you're doing here? You've done loads of different things, but how do you take time to get away from what your day job is?
Well, I mean, I'm at that stage of my life where, um, so the good book I recommend. You're a bit young for it, but it's From Strength to Strength. Great book. Talks about the two stages of your career, so the liquid and the crystalline phase. Um, the liquid phase is when you're dynamic, creative, building. That's where I guess you are. And then the crystalline phase is where you're wise, less dynamic, less creative, can use your knowledge in good ways to help the creative, dynamic people. So for an athlete, they transition from the one to the other in their 20s. For a history professor, it's in their 60s. There's a lot of research on this, and for doctors, it's about 50 to 55. So I'm on the other side of the 55 now. So I've cut back on all my academic activities now, research. I now I reduced my private a few years ago, and now I've resigned from the NHS. So I literally and I've cut out a lot of the more complex, like I've dropped arthroplasty, trauma. So because a lot of my practice is sports now, so I see predominantly sports and soft tissue work. Pretty much only sports and soft tissue work. So um, and send other things to my colleagues. So I manage it in that way. I worked with a mechanic in a garage for 10 years, and I've done various courses. So I now spend half my time, tinkering on cars and building and selling. So I do a lot of that. And so, yeah, so I make time for those other things. Health, made some cake this morning. Um,
I'm not
yeah,
sure you should
but
put that as part of the health bit, putting a big bit of cake, but it's
oh,
nice.
oh no, 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 no. This is Greek yogurt cake.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
there we go. But yeah, so I think for my dynamic phase, I literally just worked and worked and worked. Like I said, my motto used to be, "I'll sleep when I'm dead," and then I realized I was going to be dead sooner than I thought. So I think it's hard, perhaps at your stage, Yeah, and I see this with my eldest son as well. It's very hard to have that work-life balance because you're building, it's really busy. And my looking back, I'll say to you, don't feel guilty. Do the best you can, but then recognize when your transition is happening. When you see a lot of people who are older who are still trying to compete with their younger colleagues, um, and they just angry and frustrated. And you think, you need to make that transition. So that's why that book's very good for people in their 50s. I don't know if I think it'll probably apply to physios as well. Yeah.
It's really, really interesting actually, because we've as part of another business that I'm just developing at the moment, where we're helping clinicians with mindset and all of those different things. But it was talking about that guilt, and I think as I
Mm.
build my company, as other people, physios say, build their practices, and they start doing less clinical work, say, and they start being more on the business side of it, I do feel guilty when I'm doing a podcast with you, I'm going for a
Mm.
coffee with John Rogers, whatever, just doing those things, which is really important, networking and understanding what's going on. I think but I'm letting the team down by not doing my whatever. And it's like, well, I still feel like that. Whereas actually, it's like, well, no, this is now what is important for the company or whatever else it is. And trying to
Are
remember
you
that.
enjoying it?
Oh no, I love it. I love it. I
Absolutely.
absolutely love it, and
So
it's really productive as well. Like it is, I know it's productive.
absolutely. And I'm quite sure if you ask your physios and your other physios, they'll say, "Well, I'm glad you're doing that and I'm not doing that." So somebody is doing all of that stuff, which means we can get on and support you. So I nothing to feel bad about. I think, as I sort of think I never saw my kids growing up, but then when you look back, when I wasn't with them, when I wasn't working, I was with them. I wasn't playing golf. I was doing it, and they know that. And the same thing, with those other aspects is they know that you're there supporting them. So you can make, it half a day a week just clinical, which I'm sure you do, but yeah, do what you're enjoying. And I always say there's always going to be that guilt because you're trying to juggle so many things, so many balls. You're always feeling that you're letting one down, but then just accept it. Don't let that overtake you because everyone around you, everyone knows at that stage of your career, you're doing the best you can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, look, I think that's really relevant and pertinent at the moment.
Yeah.
I got married a few months ago. We're moving house, so my wife already is on my in a supportive way, but
Mhm.
is like, right, we're doing this now, and I think it's important to try and balance everything.
Do.
Um, Yeah, but no, look, Len, I've really enjoyed it. Like, I
Okay.
mean, as you said, it's been a privilege for me chatting and listening to your story, and thank you for sharing it and being so honest. It's great to hear, your background, and I certainly didn't know that you started off in physio, so no, really inspirational.
Well, a tiny bit. The bigger bit was working in the neuro rehab, but a tiny bit of the physio training.
Yeah, yeah, look, great. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to for coming for some of that
Brilliant. Thank you,
Greek yogurt
Andy.
cake at some point.
I'll bring some round.
Thanks, Len. Have a good one.
Brilliant, Andy. Thanks a lot. Bye.